Hello, and welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight, we're going deep into one of the most emotionally rich, beautifully crafted animated universes ever put to screen. We're talking about Steven Universe. And not just the show itself, but the entire history of this world. From the very dawn of Gem civilization thousands upon thousands of years ago, all the way through to the final moments of Steven's story. There is so much ground to cover tonight, so get cozy, settle in, and let's take our time with this one. Now, if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, let's begin. I think what makes Steven Universe so special, and the reason I wanted to dedicate an entire evening to it, is that on the surface, it looks like a lighthearted cartoon about a kid with a magical belly button going on adventures with his alien guardians. And it is that. But underneath all of it is this sprawling ancient mythology about an intergalactic empire, a devastating war, a family built on secrets, and a boy trying to figure out who he is when everyone around him is still dealing with the consequences of who his mother was. It is simultaneously one of the funniest and one of the most emotionally devastating animated series ever made, and the lore goes incredibly deep. So rather than going through every episode one by one, what I want to do tonight is walk through the entire universe chronologically. We will start with Gem civilization itself, how it works, what gems actually are, and then move through the diamonds, the colonization of Earth, the war, the corruption, and eventually into Steven's own story and beyond. Think of it less as a recap and more as me telling you the whole history of this world, the way someone might tell you the history of a real place, just with a lot more sentient space rocks. Let's start at the very beginning, way before Steven Universe was even born, way before the crystal gems settled down in Beach City, way before the Earth was ever considered a target for colonization. There existed an ancient alien civilization that spanned countless star systems. This was the Gem homeworld, and the beings who lived there were known simply as gems. Now, gems are not biological creatures in any way that we would understand. They are sentient, light-based entities whose entire consciousness, their memories, their personality, their very essence is contained within a gemstone. That gemstone is the only real physical part of them. Everything else, their bodies, their hair, their clothing, all of it, is a hard light projection generated by the gem itself. Think of it like a hologram, but solid enough to interact with the physical world. Fight, eat if they want to, though they do not need to, and live what appears to be a completely normal life. But if a gem's physical form is destroyed, they do not die. They retreat into their gemstone, which is sometimes called being poofed, and after some time they regenerate a new body. They can even change their appearance when they reform, choosing a new outfit or a slightly different look, as long as it is within the range of what their gem type allows. The only way to truly kill a gem is to shatter their gemstone, and that is considered one of the most horrific acts imaginable in gem culture. It is their version of murder, and it carries an enormous weight throughout the entire series. So where do gems come from? They are not born. They are made, created in massive facilities called kindergartens. The process works like this. Giant machines called injectors are drilled into the crust of a planet, and they deposit a sort of gem seed deep in the rock. Over time, that seed incubates, drawing on the planet's natural resources, its minerals, its life energy, essentially draining the host planet in order to grow a new gem. When the gem is ready, it emerges from the rock face, leaving behind a person-shaped hole in the cliff. If you have ever seen the kindergarten in the show, all those eerie, hollow silhouettes carved into canyon walls, those are the exit holes of every gem that was created there. The thing is, this process is parasitic. It kills the surrounding environment. Every gem that is produced comes at the cost of organic life. The land around a kindergarten becomes barren, lifeless, and gray. Nothing grows there anymore. It is one of the central moral tensions of the show. because the entire gem empire is built on the systematic destruction of living worlds in order to produce more gems. And once a gem is created, their role in society is determined from the moment they emerge. Gem civilization operates under a rigid caste system. Every type of gem has a specific function, and they are expected to fulfill that function for the rest of their existence, which for most gems is effectively forever. Pearl are made to be servants and status symbols. They are given to high-ranking gems as accessories, expected to stand pretty and follow orders. Rubies are foot soldiers, small and not particularly bright individually, but loyal and expendable. Sapphires are aristocrats and future seers, able to predict what will happen next with eerie accuracy. Bismuths are builders and architects, responsible for constructing gem structures across the empire. Quartzes, like amethysts and jaspers, are warriors, large, powerful, and made for combat. There is very little room for individuality in this system. You are what you are made to be. If you emerge differently from what was expected, if you come out too small, or too odd, or with abilities that do not match your type, you are considered defective. And defective gems are not treated kindly. Some are discarded. Others hide. A few, as we will learn later, end up in the dark underground spaces of Homeworld, living in fear of being discovered. This is the world that the diamonds built. And the diamonds are where things get really interesting. The Great Diamond Authority is the ruling body of all gem civilization. They are the oldest, the most powerful, and the most revered gems in existence. There are 4 of them, or at least there were, and they are named for what they are: white diamond, yellow diamond, blue diamond, and pink diamond. Each one is enormous, both in physical size and in political power. They oversee entire courts of gems, command fleets, manage colonies across the galaxy, and their word is absolute law. Gems do not just obey the diamonds, they worship them. To most gems, the diamonds are perfect, flawless, and beyond question. Let me walk you through each one. White diamond is the oldest and the most powerful of the 4. She is presented throughout the series as this almost godlike figure. She barely moves, she barely speaks, and when she does, it carries the weight of someone who has never once been challenged. White diamond believes truly and deeply that all gems are extensions of herself. She sees the entire gem race as fragments of her own perfection. In her mind, every gem should strive to be flawless, because flawlessness is what she represents. Her power is terrifying. She can override another gem's mind entirely, essentially taking control of their body and erasing their personality. When we finally meet her in the show, she is sitting alone in her ship on Homeworld, radiating this white light, and she has not left that spot in thousands of years. She does not need to. Everyone comes to her. She is the ultimate authority, and she knows it. What makes her interesting, though, and this is something the show handles beautifully, is that underneath all that control is someone who is deeply afraid of imperfection, including her own. But we will get to that. Yellow Diamond is the practical one. She is logical, strategic, and militaristic. If white is the god figure of the Diamond Authority, yellow is the general. She oversees gem production, military operations, and colonial expansion. She is the one who makes the empire run. Yellow deals with her emotions, or rather avoids dealing with them through work. After Pink Diamond's apparent death, which we will talk about in detail soon, Yellow threw herself into empire management, with even more intensity, refusing to grieve openly and instead channeling everything into control and productivity. She is also the one who ordered the creation of the cluster, that terrifying geo-weapon buried in the earth. But again, we will get there. Yellow Diamond's voice actress, Patti LuPone, brings this incredible commanding presence to the character that makes every scene she is in feel heavy with authority. One of her best lines is when she's told about the organic life on Earth, and she essentially dismisses it as meaningless compared to gem objectives. She is not cruel for the sake of cruelty. She just genuinely cannot comprehend why anyone would care about something so fragile and temporary. Blue Diamond is the emotional heart of the Authority. Though that does not mean she is soft, she oversees diplomacy and handles the more interpersonal aspects of ruling the Empire. Blue has the unique ability to project her emotions onto every gem around her, which means when she is sad, everyone near her feels crushing, overwhelming sadness. And after Pink Diamond's death, Blue was sad for a very, very long time. Thousands of years, in fact. She spent millennia visiting Earth in secret, mourning at the spot where Pink was supposedly shattered, weeping, and spreading her grief to every gem unlucky enough to be nearby. Blue's court gems, like her sapphires and agates, learn to endure wave after wave of their diamond sorrow as part of their daily existence. It is genuinely heartbreaking. But what I find compelling about Blue is that she is the diamond who came closest to understanding Pink's perspective, even before the truth was revealed. She cared about Pink more than anyone. She just did not know how to express that care in a way that was not controlling. And then there is Pink Diamond, the youngest, the smallest, the one who changed everything. Pink Diamond was created long after the other three. She was considerably smaller than white, yellow, and blue, and from the very beginning she was treated differently. Not as an equal, but more like a child. A little sister who was tolerated but not taken seriously. Pink was energetic, curious, and playful. She wanted to explore, to experience things, to be included in the work the other diamonds were doing, but they kept her at arm's length. They placated her with toys and amusements. They gave her a playmate, a gem called Spinel, who was literally created to be Pink's best friend and entertainer. They gave her her own pearl, a servant designed to cater to her every whim. But Pink wanted more than distractions. She wanted a colony. She wanted to prove that she was just as capable and important as the other diamonds. And she begged for one. For what must have been ages, she pleaded with Yellow and Blue and White to give her a planet to colonize, to let her contribute to the Empire in a real way. And eventually, after what seems like an enormous amount of pestering, they gave her one. They gave her Earth. Before I move forward, though, I want to talk about Spinel for a moment, because her story becomes incredibly important later. Pink Diamond had this little companion, Spinel, who adored her completely. Spinel was designed to be fun, to play games, to make Pink laugh. And for a while, that is exactly what she did. They played together in Pink's garden, a private space somewhere in the cosmos. But when Pink finally got her colony, she did not want Spinel tagging along. Spinel was part of her old life, the childish life she was trying to grow out of. So, Pink told Spinel to play a game. She told her to stand in the garden and wait, and that Pink would come back for her. And Spinel, loyal and trusting, stood there. She stood there for 6,000 years, waiting, smiling, never moving, believing that any moment Pink would come back. She did not come back. And when Spinel finally learned the truth, it broke her. But that is a story for later in our timeline. For now, we need to focus on what happened when Pink Diamond arrived on Earth and started her colony, because that is where everything begins to unravel. There is also the matter of Pink's original Pearl, who we later come to know as Volleyball in Steven Universe Future. Pink Diamond, for all her charm and curiosity, had a temper. A real one. At some point before she was given Earth, she threw a tantrum powerful enough to crack her Pearl's eye. The damage was so severe that White Diamond took Pink Pearl away from her, and that Pearl remained under White's control for thousands of years, eventually becoming White Pearl with that eerie, cracked smile. This detail matters because it tells us something important about Pink Diamond. She was not just the lovable rebel the show initially presents her as. She was immature, careless with other people's well-being, and capable of causing real harm to the gems who loved her most. This is a thread that runs through the entire series. The more you learn about Pink Diamond, the more complicated she becomes. Pink was also given a replacement Pearl, a brand new one. And this Pearl, the one we come to know simply as Pearl throughout the show, would become one of the most important figures in the entire Steven Universe story. But at the time, she was just a servant, a loyal, obedient accessory for a diamond who was about to step into the biggest responsibility of her life. It is worth noting that the exact history of the diamonds themselves is still somewhat mysterious. We do not get a full origin story for where they came from or how they first emerged. What the show does tell us, based on murals in the Earth-Moon base and drawings from the episode Familiar, is that white diamond came first, followed by yellow, then blue, and finally pink. The art book Steven Universe End of an Era provides some additional context, though it is noted as non-canon material that may contain some canon elements. What we do know for certain is that white diamond established the Empire's caste system, its obsession with perfection, and the rigid hierarchy that every gem was expected to follow. She set the template, and the other diamonds enforced it. One more thing before we move on. The gem Homeworld itself. We get glimpses of it throughout the series, and what we see is a planet that has been completely hollowed out. It is cracked and broken, visually resembling a shattered egg. The implication is that Homeworld's own resources were mined and drained long ago, which is exactly why the diamonds needed to colonize other worlds. They consumed their own planet in the process of building their empire, and they have been doing the same thing to other worlds ever since. It is a civilization that survives by consuming, and Earth was supposed to be just another meal. So that is the foundation. Ancient, powerful, rigid, beautiful in its own way, but deeply, deeply broken. Deeply. An empire built on hierarchy, obedience, and the systematic destruction of living worlds. And at the top of it all, 4 diamonds who love each other but cannot seem to stop hurting everyone around them, including each other. Now, let's talk about what happened when Pink Diamond actually arrived on Earth and everything changed forever. When Pink Diamond was given Earth as her colony, it was supposed to be a straightforward operation. Homeworld had done this countless times before. You arrive at a planet, you survey its resources, you build kindergartens, you produce new gems, and once the planet is drained, you move on to the next one. Earth was rich in the kinds of minerals and organic material that gem production requires, which made it an ideal candidate. And for Pink, this was finally her chance to prove herself. Her chance to show yellow and blue and white that she was not just the little diamond who needed to be entertained and managed. She was a real diamond, capable of running a real colony. So the colonization began. Homeworld gems arrived on Earth and started constructing the infrastructure needed for gem production. 2 major kindergartens were established. The first was called the Prime Kindergarten, located in what would eventually become a barren canyon somewhere in North America. This was the main production facility, and it was built carefully, methodically, with proper spacing and timing for the gems incubating inside the rock. The Prime Kindergarten produced high-quality gems, particularly quartzes. This is actually where amethyst was created, though she would not emerge for a very long time, and when she did, she came out far later than expected, and much smaller than a standard amethyst should be, but we will talk about her story later. The second kindergarten was called the Beta Kindergarten, located in a desert region. Unlike the Prime Kindergarten, the Beta was built in a rush. It was constructed during the middle of the war, at when Homeworld needed more soldiers fast, and the quality control was essentially non-existent. The exit holes in the Beta Kindergarten are jagged, uneven, and crammed close together, which tells you just how desperate and hasty the production was. Most of the gems produced there were considered subpar. But there was one notable exception. A Jasper emerged from the Beta Kindergarten, who was, against all odds, absolutely perfect. She was described as the ultimate quartz, the strongest, most capable soldier to emerge from Earth's soil. This Jasper would become one of the show's most important antagonists, and her entire identity is wrapped up in the fact that she was perfect despite coming from a place that was supposed to produce nothing but failures. But here is where the story takes its most important turn. Pink Diamond, while overseeing her colony, started exploring the Earth herself. Now, diamonds do not normally interact with their subjects. They give orders from a distance. They sit in their palanquins and their thrones and their ships, and the work happens around them. But Pink was not like the other diamonds. She was curious, and her new pearl, the one who would eventually become our pearl, actually encouraged that curiosity. Pearl suggested that Pink could shapeshift into the form of a common quartz soldier and walk among the newly emerging gems without anyone knowing she was a diamond. It was a clever idea, and Pink loved it, so she transformed herself into a Rose Quartz, a type of gem with pink coloring and a warm, nurturing disposition. And she went out into the world. What she found changed everything. Earth was alive. Not in the abstract way that other colonized planets might have had some basic organisms. Earth was teeming with complex, beautiful, astonishing life. Plants, animals, oceans, ecosystems, weather, seasons, and humans. These fragile, short-lived beings who built civilizations and created art and loved each other and died and were somehow, impossibly, just as vibrant and meaningful as any gem. Pink had never seen anything like it. The gem empire operated on the assumption that organic life was irrelevant, just biological noise on the surface of a planet that existed to be consumed. But when Pink actually walked among it, when she felt the grass under her feet and watched the sun set over the ocean and talked to humans who would grow old and die in what seemed like the blink of an eye, something shifted inside her. She fell in love with Earth. Genuinely, deeply fell in love with it. And she realized that her colonization process, was going to destroy all of it. Every kindergarten built, every gem incubated was another piece of Earth's life force drained away. If the colony was completed, Earth would end up like every other conquered world, dead, gray, and hollow. So Pink did something that no diamond had ever done before. She went to the other diamonds and she begged them to let her stop the colonization. She told them about the life on Earth, about how remarkable it was, about how it deserved to be preserved. She pleaded. She argued. She made her case over and over again. And they said no, every time. Yellow Diamond told her to finish what she had started. She told Pink that a diamond does not abandon a colony. A diamond completes her mission. Blue Diamond tried to be more sympathetic in her own way. She could see that Pink cared about the organic life, so she created a human zoo. A literal zoo, floating in space where a small group of humans were abducted and kept in a contained environment, supposedly for preservation. Blue thought this would satisfy Pink. It did the opposite. It made Pink furious. She did not want Earth's humans to be kept in a cage like exotic pets. She wanted them to be free, to live on their planet, to continue existing as they always had. But the diamonds would not listen. No matter how many times Pink asked, the answer was always the same. The colony continues. So Pink decided that if she could not convince them as a diamond, she would fight them as something else. This is where the Rose Quartz persona stopped being a disguise for fun and became something much more significant. Pink Diamond, using the form of Rose Quartz, began a rebellion. She and her pearl, who was the only one who knew the truth about Rose's real identity, started the crystal gems, just the two of them, at first. Rose Quartz, the supposed ordinary quartz soldier who loved Earth and wanted to protect it, and Pearl, the supposedly renegade servant who had broken free of her programming to follow Rose. They started small, sabotage missions against gem infrastructure, disrupting kindergarten operations, spreading the word among Earth Station gems that there was another way to live, that they did not have to follow Homeworld's orders, that Earth was worth protecting. And slowly, other gems listened. Gems who had seen Earth's beauty for themselves. Gems who were tired of the rigid hierarchy. Gems who wanted to choose their own paths. The crystal gems grew from 2 members to dozens, and eventually to an army. And here is the surreal part. Pink Diamond was fighting a war against herself. As Rose Quartz, she led the rebellion, As Pink Diamond, she continued to make excuses to the other diamonds about why the rebellion was too strong to crush. She would switch between identities, sometimes within the same day. Rose Quartz would attack a homeworld installation in the morning, and by the afternoon, Pink Diamond would be sitting in her palanquin, telling Yellow and Blue that these rebels were proving more troublesome than expected. It was an elaborate, exhausting, and increasingly dangerous double life. The rebellion grew into a full-scale war. The Gem War for Earth lasted roughly 1,000 years, and it was devastating. Battles were fought across the planet. A place called the Strawberry Battlefield, shown in the series as a field of giant strawberries growing from the remains of fallen gems, was one of the major conflict sites. Gem structures, observation towers, communication hubs, and tactical bases were built and destroyed and rebuilt across the Earth. The landscape still bears the scars of that war in the show's present day. During this conflict, some incredibly important events took place. Let me walk through the key ones. One of the most pivotal moments was the creation of Garnet. Blue Diamond sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth to investigate the growing rebellion, and among that envoy was a sapphire, a rare aristocratic gem with the power to see the future. She was accompanied by 3 ruby soldiers as bodyguards. Sapphire had foreseen that the crystal gems would attack, that the rebels would poof 7 gems in the battle, including 2 of her ruby guards and Sapphire herself, but that the rebels would ultimately be captured and the rebellion would end. She reported this prophecy calmly, accepting her own destruction as inevitable. But when the attack actually happened, something unexpected occurred. One of the ruby guards, instead of accepting the predicted outcome, threw herself in front of Sapphire to protect her. That act of instinct, of defiance against the predicted future, caused the 2 of them to accidentally fuse together. Fusion, as we will talk about in more detail later, is when 2 gems combine their forms to create a new, larger, more powerful entity. Same type fusion, like 3 rubies combining into a bigger ruby, is acceptable on Homeworld, but cross-type fusion, a ruby and a sapphire becoming something entirely new, was considered an abomination. The fused being that emerged, confused and stumbling, was neither ruby nor sapphire. She was something else entirely. She was Garnet. The Homeworld gems were disgusted. Blue Diamond herself was appalled. Ruby was going to be shattered for what she had done. But Rose Quartz, who witnessed the whole thing, was amazed. She told Garnet that she was wonderful, that she was something entirely new, and she invited them, Ruby and Sapphire, Garnet, to join the crystal gems. They did, and Garnet would go on to become one of the most important figures in the entire crystal gem movement. This event, depicted beautifully in the episode called The Answer, is one of the show's most beloved stories. It is essentially a love story told in the style of a fairy tale, and it establishes that Garnet's entire existence is an act of rebellion, a living rejection of Homeworld's rules. Another key figure during the war was Bismuth. She was a builder by nature, a construction gem, but she became one of Rose's fiercest soldiers and closest friends. Bismuth was responsible for forging many of the crystal gems' weapons, including Rose's legendary sword, which had the unique property of being able to destroy a gem's physical form without damaging their gemstone. It was designed to be a merciful weapon, one that could win battles without killing. But Bismuth grew frustrated with that mercy. She wanted to end the war decisively, so she created the Breaking Point, a pile-driver-like weapon specifically designed to shatter gems to kill them permanently. When she showed it to Rose expecting praise, Rose was horrified. Shattering was exactly what Rose was trying to prevent. The crystal gems were fighting for freedom, not genocide. An argument erupted, which escalated into a physical fight, and Rose ended up poofing Bismuth and trapping her gem in a bubble hidden away inside the extra-dimensional space of Lion's Mane. Rose then lied to the other crystal gems, telling them that Bismuth had been lost in battle at the Battle of the Ziggurat. this lie would sit undiscovered for thousands of years. This is another thread in the complicated tapestry of who Rose Quartz really was. She believed in mercy, but she also lied to her closest friends. She imprisoned an ally and covered it up. She made decisions that she believed were right, but she made them unilaterally, without allowing anyone else to have a say. Lapis Lazuli's story is another tragedy from this era. Lapis was a homeworld gem, not a rebel. She was on Earth for reasons that are never fully explained, possibly stationed there or visiting. And she got caught up in the chaos of the war. She was poofed, meaning her physical form was destroyed. And in the confusion, a homeworld gem found her gemstone and trapped it inside a mirror, thinking she was a crystal gem. This was supposed to be a tool, a way to extract information. Instead, it became a prison. Lapis was conscious inside that mirror for thousands of years, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything except reflect back what she was shown. She was stepped on during the evacuation of Earth, which cracked her gem, and she was left behind, forgotten, trapped in a mirror on a dead battlefield for millennia. Eventually, the war reached a breaking point, both literally and figuratively. Pink Diamond had been living this double life for centuries, and she was exhausted. She was done being a diamond. She wanted to live as Rose Quartz, on Earth, with the crystal gems, forever. But as long as Pink Diamond existed as a figure, as a leader of the colony, the other diamonds would never stop fighting for Earth. Her colony meant too much to them. Her existence meant the war would never end, so Pink came up with a plan. And it was Blue Diamond, ironically, who gave her the idea. During one of their conversations, Blue said something to the effect that the other diamonds would not stop as long as Pink was there to fight for the colony. She meant it as a reason for Pink to stay and keep trying. But Pink heard something different. She heard a solution. Pink Diamond would have to die. Not really, of course, but the world would have to believe she had. Pink and Pearl devised an elaborate deception. Pearl would shapeshift into the form of Rose Quartz. Pink would crush some dirt from the earth and turn it into fake gemstone shards that resembled her own diamond. She would swallow these shards. Then, in a public setting, with witnesses watching, Pearl, disguised as Rose, would strike Pink Diamond with Rose's sword. Pink would poof. The fake shards would scatter, and every gem who saw it would believe that Rose Quartz had shattered Pink Diamond. And that is exactly what happened. On that day, in front of witnesses including at least one ruby who would carry the memory for thousands of years, Rose Quartz shattered Pink Diamond. The crystal gems believed it. Homeworld believed it. Everyone in the universe believed that Pink Diamond was dead, murdered by the leader of the rebellion. Only two beings knew the truth: Pink Diamond, who reformed permanently as Rose Quartz, and would never take her diamond form again, and Pearl, who was given a final command by Pink, a diamond's order, to never tell anyone what had really happened. And because of how pearls are built, that command was not just a request, it became a physical impossibility. Pearl literally could not speak about it even if she wanted to. Whenever she tried, her hands would move involuntarily to cover her mouth. She carried that secret, that burden, for over 5,000 years. The fallout from this event was catastrophic. And that is what we need to talk about next. The remaining 3 diamonds, white, yellow, and blue, were devastated by Pink's apparent death. They had lost one of their own, and regardless of how they had treated Pink, regardless of how they had dismissed her concerns and minimized her feelings, they loved her. In their own deeply dysfunctional way, they loved her. Blue Diamond would spend the next several thousand years drowning in grief, visiting Earth to mourn at the sight of Pink's supposed shattering. Yellow Diamond would throw herself into work, trying to bury her grief under productivity and empire management. White Diamond would retreat even further into isolation, becoming even more rigid and controlling, as though she could prevent any more imperfection from entering her world by simply refusing to engage with it. But before any of that mourning began, the diamonds did something terrible. they decided that Earth needed to be punished. Every crystal gem still on the planet needed to be destroyed. So the 3 remaining diamonds ordered a full evacuation of all homeworld gems from Earth. Every soldier, every colonist, every gem loyal to homeworld was told to leave immediately. This created a panicked exodus. Ships launched. Gems fled through the galaxy warp, a network of teleportation pads that connected Earth to homeworld. In the chaos of that evacuation, Lapis Lazuli's mirror was dropped and stepped on, cracking her already trapped gemstone. She was left behind, forgotten in the rush. And then, once the evacuation was complete, the 3 diamonds combined their powers and launched a single, devastating attack against Earth. This event is known as the Corrupting Light. The intention was annihilation. The diamonds wanted to obliterate every gem still standing on Earth's surface. But here's the thing. The attack required all 4 diamonds, working in concert to achieve its full destructive potential. With pink diamond absent from the equation, missing from the harmonic combination, the blast did not destroy the gems. Instead, it did something arguably worse. It corrupted them. The corrupting light warped the minds, bodies, and emotions of every unshielded gem on the planet. Gems who had been rational, sentient beings moments before were twisted into monstrous animalistic creatures. Their forms became grotesque and unstable. They lost the ability to think clearly, to communicate, to remember who they were. They became the gem monsters that Steven and the Crystal Gems fight throughout the original series. These were not mindless beasts from some alien wilderness. They were people. Soldiers, friends, comrades who had fought alongside Rose Quartz in the rebellion. They were crystal gems and even some homeworld gems who had not made it off the planet in time. And Rose could not save them. When the light came, Rose activated her shield, a massive pink bubble that could protect those closest to her. She managed to cover Pearl and Garnet. That was it. Just the 3 of them, huddled under a bubble while the world around them was consumed by blinding, corrupting light. Every other crystal gem, hundreds of them, possibly thousands, was transformed. Greg Universe, Steven's father, would later tell Steven about this moment. He said that during the war, in the end, Rose could only save a handful of her closest friends. If it had not been for her shield, he did not know what would have happened. That line carries so much weight when you understand the full context. There were a few other survivors, though not because of Rose's shield. Bismuth survived because she was already bubbled and hidden inside Lion's extra-dimensional mane, sealed away by Rose herself after their argument over the breaking point. Lapis Lazuli survived because she was trapped inside the mirror, which apparently provided enough protection from the blast. And Amethyst survived because she had not yet emerged from the prime kindergarten. She was still incubating inside the rock. The blast corrupted the gems on the surface, but Amethyst was deep underground, and she would not come out for another 500 years. When she finally did emerge, she was alone. Every other gem from her kindergarten was long gone. She wandered the empty canyon by herself until Rose, Pearl, and Garnet found her and took her in. But the diamonds were not finished with Earth. Before or during the evacuation, Homeworld planted something else in the planet, a weapon. They collected the shattered remains of gems who had fallen during the war, fragments of their gemstones, and forcibly fused these fragments together. These were gems who had been broken, who were incomplete, and Homeworld smashed the pieces together into horrifying, screaming combinations. The small versions of these experiments are called cluster gems, and when Garnet first encounters them in the show, in a kindergarten deep underground, her reaction is visceral. She is horrified. She nearly comes apart, because for Garnet, who is herself a fusion built on love and consent, these forced fusions represent the most obscene violation imaginable. But the small cluster gems were just prototypes. The real weapon, the one the diamonds actually cared about, was called the cluster. It was composed of millions, possibly billions, of shattered gem fragments all fused together and planted deep in the Earth's mantle beneath the Beta Kindergarten. The cluster was designed to incubate over thousands of years, and when it finally took its form, it would be so impossibly massive, larger than the Earth itself, that the act of emerging would rip the entire planet apart from the inside. Earth would be destroyed, the crystal gems would be annihilated, and the diamonds would have their revenge. Yellow Diamond was the one who drove this project. She wanted Earth gone, not just conquered or reclaimed but erased. The colony that had cost them Pink Diamond would be wiped from the universe entirely. It was grief weaponized on a planetary scale, and so the war ended, not with a victory celebration, but with devastation. The crystal gems had technically won, in the sense that Homeworld retreated and Earth was not fully colonized, but the cost was staggering. Thousands of gems corrupted into monsters, a geo-weapon ticking away in the planet's core, and only 3 crystal gems left standing, soon to be 4 when they found Amethyst. This period marks the beginning of what gem historians call Era 2. The failed colonization of Earth had cost Homeworld enormous resources. The war effort, the construction of 2 kindergartens, the military campaigns, the forced fusion experiments, and then the abandonment of the colony, all of it was a net loss. Homeworld received no return on their investment. As a result, the Gem Empire entered a period of decline. Resources became scarce. Kindergartens across the empire began producing weaker gems. Newer paradots, for example, were physically smaller and lacked many of the abilities that earlier gems possessed. They became dependent on technological enhancements, limb enhancers, and gadgets to compensate for what they lacked naturally. The knowledge of the rebellion itself was suppressed. Most Era 2 gems had no idea what had happened on Earth. The war was essentially erased from public history. And on Earth, the last crystal gems lived quietly. Rose Quartz, Pearl, Garnet, and eventually Amethyst settled in what would become Beach City. They built a home into the base of an ancient gem temple right on the beach. And for the next several thousand years, they protected the Earth from corrupted gems, capturing them, bubbling their gemstones, and hoping that someday they might find a way to heal them. Rose never stopped trying. She spent centuries searching for a cure for corruption, using her healing tears, experimenting, looking for answers. She never found one. It would take thousands of years. And her son, to finally undo what the diamonds had done. Now, I want to spend some time with the crystal gems themselves, because understanding who they are, really understanding them, is essential to appreciating the story. Let us start with Garnet, because she is extraordinary. Garnet is the fusion of ruby and sapphire, and she exists permanently as their combined form. Unlike most fusions in the show, which are temporary in form for specific purposes, Garnet is Garnet all the time. Ruby and sapphire are so deeply in love, so completely in sync, that staying fused is their natural state. Being apart is what feels unnatural to them. Garnet has her own personality, her own voice, her own way of seeing the world. She is calm, steady, and speaks with this quiet confidence that makes everything she says feel like it matters. She rarely wastes words. When Garnet tells you something, you listen, because she has thought about it from every angle, sometimes literally. That is because Garnet has future vision. Inherited from Sapphire's abilities, Garnet can see multiple possible timelines branching out from any given moment. She does not see one fixed future. She sees possibilities, probabilities, and she uses that information to make decisions. It is an incredible power, but it also comes with enormous pressure. She is constantly weighing outcomes, constantly aware of what could go wrong. And sometimes when the possibilities are overwhelming, or when something truly unexpected happens, it throws her off balance in a way that is genuinely affecting to watch. After Rose gave up her physical form to have Steven, Garnet became the de facto leader of the Crystal Gems. She takes that responsibility seriously, but she is not authoritarian about it. She leads by example, by presence, by being the rock that everyone else leans on. The irony, of course, is that she is made of 2 people who lean on each other. That is her strength. The wedding episode in Season 5, where Ruby and Sapphire choose to get married and fuse back into Garnet as a deliberate celebration of their love, was a landmark moment in animation history. It was the first same-sex wedding involving a major character depicted in American children's animation. Voiced by Estelle, the singer behind the hit song American Boy, Garnet's voice carries this incredible warmth and authority, and her signature song, Stronger Than You, became one of the show's most beloved musical moments. Pearl is perhaps the most complex member of the Crystal Gems. She was created to be a servant. On Homeworld, pearls are accessories. They are designed to be beautiful, obedient, and silent. They stand beside their owners and hold their things and do not speak unless spoken to. Our Pearl was made for Pink Diamond, and she served her loyally. But Pearl is different. She is brilliant, she is fierce, and she has a depth of feeling that goes far beyond what any Pearl was supposed to possess. Pearl fell in love with Rose Quartz, with Pink Diamond, and she carried that love for thousands of years. It defined her. For most of the show's timeline, Pearl's entire identity is wrapped around Rose. She fought in the war for Rose. She kept Rose's secret about being Pink Diamond for over 5,000 years, physically unable to tell anyone even when she wanted to. She mourned Rose's death more deeply than anyone, and she struggled enormously with the fact that Rose chose Greg, a human, and eventually chose to give up her existence to create Steven. Pearl's journey throughout the series is one of the most powerful character arcs in the whole show. It is the story of someone learning to exist for herself instead of for someone else. Learning that she has value beyond her devotion to another person. Learning to let go without forgetting. There is a song in the episode It's Over, Isn't It?, where Pearl sings about watching Rose fall in love with Greg. And it is absolutely devastating. She sings about how she was there through the entire war, through everything, and now she has to accept that it is over. It is one of the most emotionally honest moments in any animated series. Pearl is also, by the way, an incredibly skilled sword fighter. She trained herself over the course of the war, going from a servant who was never supposed to fight to one of the most formidable warriors in the Crystal Gems. She is meticulous, precise, and deadly when she needs to be. She later trains Connie, Steven's best friend, in sword fighting, passing on everything she knows. Amethyst is the heart of the team in a different way. She was made on Earth in the prime kindergarten, but she emerged 500 years after she was supposed to. Because of this delayed emergence, she came out smaller than a normal Amethyst should be. By Homeworld standards, she is defective, an overcooked runt. And even though the Crystal Gems never treated her that way, that knowledge haunts her. There is a scene early in the series where she takes Steven to the kindergarten where she was born, and you can see the weight of it on her. She knows what she was supposed to be. She knows she does not measure up. Amethyst deals with this insecurity through humor, recklessness, and a carefully maintained exterior of not caring about anything. She is the most human of the Crystal Gems in a lot of ways. She eats, she sleeps, she hangs out, she watches TV. She is messy and loud and impulsive. But beneath all of that is someone who genuinely fears that she is not enough. Her arc throughout the series is about accepting herself as she is. Not as what Homeworld intended her to be. Not as what the other Crystal Gems might wish she were. But as herself. It is beautiful. And Michaela Dietz's voice performance brings such authenticity to every moment. And then there is Greg Universe, Steven's dad. A human with no powers, no gem heritage, no cosmic significance whatsoever. He is a college dropout who changed his last name from DeMeo to Universe, inspired by a musician he admired, and traveled the country with a sleazy manager named Marty, trying to make it as a rock star. He ended up in Beach City, played a concert at the beach, and Rose Quartz showed up. She had never met anyone like him. He had never met anyone like her. They fell in love. What is remarkable about Greg is how emotionally intelligent he is. He is not a fighter. He cannot go on missions. He lives in a van next to his car wash and plays guitar. But he understands people, really understands them, in a way that even the ancient powerful gems sometimes cannot. He gives Stephen grounded human wisdom when everything else in his life is cosmic and overwhelming. He loved Rose genuinely, and he loves Stephen unconditionally. He is the anchor, and the show never once treats him as less important because he is just a human. If anything, his humanity is his superpower. These are the people who raised Steven Universe. A fusion made of love, a renegade servant carrying an impossible secret, a so-called defective warrior with a heart bigger than Homeworld, and a musician who fell in love with an alien. That is the family he was born into, and the story of who his mother really was, what she did, and what she left behind would shape everything about his life. Before we get deeper into Steven's story, I want to talk about fusion in more detail, because it is genuinely one of the most brilliant storytelling devices in the entire show. We have already touched on it with Garnet, but fusion goes so much deeper than just two gems combining into a bigger gem. It is the emotional and thematic core of Steven Universe. Here is how fusion works mechanically. When two or more gems synchronize with each other, emotionally, physically, mentally, they can merge their forms into a single new being. This new fusion has its own body, its own voice, its own personality, and its own unique abilities that neither component gem possesses alone. The fusion is not just a combination, it is something entirely new. Garnet is not just Ruby plus Sapphire. Garnet is Garnet. She has her own thoughts, her own feelings, her own way of experiencing the world. On Homeworld, fusion between gems of the same type is perfectly acceptable. An army might fuse several rubies together into a larger, more powerful ruby. That is just a tactical decision. But fusion between different types of gems is considered revolting, shameful, and criminal. It is treated the way many oppressive societies have treated interracial relationships or same-sex relationships throughout human history. And that parallel is absolutely intentional. Rebecca Sugar, the creator of Steven Universe, has spoken openly about using fusion as a metaphor for relationships, both healthy and unhealthy ones. And the show treats it with real care and nuance. Let me walk through some of the key fusions, because each one tells you something important about the relationship between the gems involved. We already know Garnet, Ruby, and Sapphire. Their fusion is built on love, trust, and mutual respect. They make each other stronger, and being together is their natural state. Garnet is the embodiment of what a healthy, loving relationship looks like. Opal is the fusion of amethyst and pearl. She is tall, elegant, and incredibly powerful, wielding a magical bow. But opal is difficult for amethyst and pearl to form, and even harder to maintain, because those two argue constantly. They have very different personalities and they clash all the time. But when they manage to work together, when they set aside their differences and genuinely cooperate, opal is the result. She represents what collaboration looks like when it actually works. Sugilite is the fusion of amethyst and garnet. She is massive, wild, and almost uncontrollably powerful. Sugilite loves being Sugilite. She does not want to unfuse. She is addicted to her own strength and recklessness, and she becomes destructive. This fusion represents what happens when a relationship amplifies your worst qualities rather than your best ones. Amethyst's recklessness plus Garnet's power creates something intoxicating but dangerous. Sardonyx is the fusion of Pearl and Garnet. She is theatrical, precise, and showmanlike, with a personality that is all flair and performance. Sardonyx is generally a stable fusion, but there is an arc in the show where Pearl secretly keeps engineering situations that require them to fuse, not because the situation actually calls for it, but because Pearl is addicted to the feeling of being part of Sardonyx. It is essentially about consent and trust. And when Garnet finds out that Pearl has been manipulating her into fusing, she feels deeply violated. That storyline is handled with incredible maturity for a show aimed at younger audiences. Alexandra is the fusion of Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl all together. She is enormous and incredibly powerful, but also unstable. Three very different personalities trying to coexist in one body leads to internal conflict, and she tends to come apart at the worst moments. She represents the difficulty of maintaining a complex group dynamic, especially under pressure. Stevani is the fusion of Steven and Connie, his best friend. This is the first human-gem fusion in existence, and it was a shock to everyone, including Steven and Connie themselves. Stevani first appears in the episode Alone Together, and they are presented as a beautiful androgynous person who experiences the world with a sense of wonder and joy. Stevani represents the deep bond between Steven and Connie, a bond that transcends the usual categories. They are more than friends, more than partners. They are two people who fit together perfectly. And then there is Malachite, and this one is important. Malachite is the fusion of Jasper and Lapis Lazuli, and she is not born out of love or trust or cooperation. She is born out of desperation and mutual destruction. When Jasper tries to force Lapis to fuse with her in order to defeat Steven, Lapis agrees, but not for the reason Jasper expects. The moment they fuse, Lapis uses her water powers to chain Malachite to the bottom of the ocean, trapping both of them. She is not fusing to help Jasper. She is fusing to imprison her, and in the process, she imprisons herself too. Malachite is an explicit metaphor for a toxic, abusive relationship. Two beings locked together, each one hurting the other, neither one able or willing to let go. Lapis says at one point that she is done being a prisoner, so instead, she has become the jailer. It is a devastating line, and the entire Malachite arc is handled with a gravity that speaks to real experiences of people in unhealthy relationships. Rebecca Sugar has said that she wanted fusion to be something that reflected the full spectrum of human relationships, the good ones, the complicated ones, the abusive ones. And the show accomplishes that beautifully. Fusion in Steven Universe is never just a cool power-up. It is always, always about the people involved and what their connection means. Now, let us talk about the place where all of this happens, Beach City. Beach City is a small, sleepy coastal town located in the fictional state of Delmarva, which is a portmanteau of Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, placing it somewhere on the mid-Atlantic coast of the United States. It is the kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where the same families have been running the same businesses for generations, and where the biggest excitement on a normal day might be a new flavor at the Big Donut. The crystal gems live in a house built right into the base of an ancient gem temple, positioned on the beach at the edge of town. The temple itself is enormous, carved into the cliff face in the shape of a multi-armed woman, and it contains pocket dimensions and rooms that belong to each gem. But the front of the temple is just a cozy little beach house where Steven sleeps on a loft bed and keeps his collection of video games and snacks. It is this wonderful juxtaposition, ancient alien architecture containing a regular kid's bedroom. Steven's dad, Greg, lives in a van next to his car wash called It's Awash. It is not glamorous, but Greg is content. He has his music, his son, and his memories of Rose. The car wash becomes a kind of secondary home base throughout the series, a place where Steven goes to get grounded. Human advice when the gem stuff gets too overwhelming. The town itself is populated by a cast of recurring human characters who give the show so much of its warmth and humor. There is Connie Maheswaran, Steven's best friend, who starts out as a shy, bookish girl with strict parents and grows into a confident, sword-wielding warrior who can hold her own alongside the crystal gems. Connie's arc mirrors Steven's in many ways. She is a human who chooses to be part of this world, who trains and fights and sacrifices not because she has to, but because she loves Steven and believes in what the crystal gems stand for. There is Lars and Sadie, who work at the Big Donut. Lars starts the series as an insecure, prickly teenager who is too cool for everything and too afraid to be genuine. By the end of the show, he has been to space, been killed and resurrected, captained a crew of misfit gems, and come back to Beach City as a completely different person. His growth is one of the most satisfying long-term arcs in the series. Sadie, meanwhile, goes from working the donut shop to fronting a rock band called Sadie Killer and the Suspects. She finds her own voice, independent of Lars. Ronaldo Fryman runs a conspiracy theory blog called Keep Beach City Weird, and is honestly annoying a lot of the time, but in a very endearing way. What is funny is that many of his conspiracy theories are accidentally correct. He just has no idea why. The pizza family runs Fish Stew Pizza. The Frymans run Beach City Walk Fries. Everyone in Beach City is connected. And the show takes the time to develop these human characters alongside the cosmic gem storyline. It matters that Steven has a community. It matters that he is part of a town. The human side of his life is not filler between gem missions. It is the thing that keeps him tethered, and that brings us to Steven himself and the journey he goes through. Steven Quartz' universe is half human and half gem. He is the son of Greg Universe and Rose Quartz, which means he inherited Rose's gemstone, a pink gem embedded in his navel. When Rose decided to have a child with Greg, she knew what it would cost. Gems do not have biological bodies. Rose's physical form was a projection from her gemstone. In order for Steven to exist, Rose had to give up that projection permanently. She could not have a child and continue to exist, so she chose Steven. She chose to bring a new life into the world at the cost of her own. Steven was born with Rose's gem, and Rose was gone. This means that Steven is not just Rose's child. He carries her gem. In some ways, he is her. But in every way that matters, he is his own person. And figuring out that distinction, figuring out where Rose ends and Steven begins, is the central question of the entire series. In the early episodes of the show, Steven is a kid. He is enthusiastic, optimistic, a little goofy, and he idolizes the crystal gems. He wants to go on missions. He wants to be useful. He wants to be a crystal gem. But his powers are unpredictable, and he has very little control over them. His gem manifests different abilities based on his emotional state. He can summon a shield like Rose, but only when he is feeling particularly protective or brave. He has healing saliva, which can repair cracked gems and heal injuries, but it does not always work. He can create a protective bubble around himself and others. And as the series progresses, he discovers more abilities. He can enter other people's dreams. He can communicate with and influence plant life. He can project his consciousness across vast distances. He can fuse with other gems and even with Connie. But the powers are not the point. They are a reflection of Steven's emotional state, and as he grows up, as he learns more about the world and about his mother, those emotions get increasingly complicated. One of the most important early discoveries is Lion. Steven finds a magical pink lion in the desert who seems to be drawn to him. Lion becomes Steven's companion and, more importantly, a walking vault of Rose's secrets. Lion has a pocket dimension accessible through his mane, and inside it, Steven finds all sorts of things Rose left behind. A sword, a VHS tape with a recorded message for Steven, Bismuth's bubbled gem, a chest that, as far as we know, was never opened. Lion is essentially a living link to Rose's past, delivering her secrets to Steven one at a time. Through the first 2 seasons, Steven grows steadily. He learns to control his powers. He goes on missions. He befriends Connie and they begin training together. He meets Peridot, a homeworld gem sent to Earth to check on the cluster. And through patience, kindness, and an extraordinary amount of persistence, he convinces Peridot to defect from homeworld and join the crystal gems. This is one of the show's best arcs. Peridot starts out as an antagonist, a rigid, by-the-book technician who sees Earth as nothing more than a failed colony. By the time she is calling Yellow Diamond a clod directly to her face over a communication screen, she has become one of the most beloved characters in the show. Steven also befriends Lapis Lazuli, after freeing her from the mirror she had been trapped in for thousands of years. Lapis is traumatized, angry, and deeply distrustful of the crystal gems who she blames for her imprisonment. Her relationship with Steven is one of the few things that brings her any comfort. Eventually, she and Peridot end up living together in a barn outside Beach City, and their odd couple friendship becomes a fan favorite part of the show. But the real turning point comes when Steven learns about the cluster. Peridot reveals that Homeworld planted a geo-weapon in the Earth's mantle, a massive forced fusion of millions of gem shards that will destroy the planet when it takes its form. The crystal gems build a drill, and Stephen and Peridot descend into the earth to confront it. When they reach the cluster, Stephen does something that no one expected. Instead of trying to destroy it, he communicates with it. He enters a psychic state and talks to the fragments of the cluster, the millions of shattered gems that make up the weapon. He tells them they do not need to form. They can find the other pieces of themselves right where they are. They can hold each other right there inside the earth, and it works. The cluster's fragments begin bubbling each other, containing themselves. The geo-weapon is neutralized, not through violence, but through compassion. That is Stephen in a single moment. He resolves a planet-threatening crisis, not by fighting, but by talking, by empathizing, by finding the humanity, or in this case, the gem-anity, in something that everyone else saw as a weapon. It is the thesis of the entire show, distilled into one scene. And then things escalate. Jasper returns. The homeworld threat becomes more direct. Stephen begins to learn darker truths about his mother's past. He discovers that bismuth was bubbled and hidden, not lost in battle as the crystal gems were told. He learns about Rose's lies, her secrets, her complicated legacy. And eventually the threat from homeworld becomes so great that Stephen makes the most selfless decision of his young life. Aquamarine and Topaz, two homeworld gems, arrive on Earth with a list of humans to abduct. Stephen realizes that the list is based on information his mother once shared with Homeworld, back when she was still Pink Diamond. The only way to stop them from taking his friends is to turn himself in, so he does. He tells Aquamarine that he is Rose Quartz, shows her his gem, and allows himself to be taken to Homeworld. Lars, who accidentally got caught up in the situation, ends up going with him. On Homeworld, Stephen and Lars are put on trial. Escape through the underground tunnels beneath the planet's surface and encounter the Off-Colors, a group of defective gems who have been hiding from Homeworld's enforcers for centuries. During their escape, Lars is killed protecting Stephen and the Off-Colors from a pursuing robot. Stephen, devastated, cries over Lars's body, and his tears bring Lars back to life. The same healing power Rose possessed, but amplified by Stephen's love and grief. Lars is resurrected, but changed. His skin turns pink. His hair becomes a portal, like Lion's mane, connecting to the same pocket dimension. Lars is now something new, something between human and gem, and he stays behind on Homeworld with the Off-Colors to find a way home while Stephen escapes through Lars's hair to return to Earth. It is an incredible sequence of events, and it marks the point where Steven Universe transitions from a show about a kid learning to be a hero into something much heavier and more emotionally demanding. Now we arrive at the moment that changed everything, the twist that recontextualized the entire series. The revelation that Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond. This had been theorized by fans for years before it was confirmed. There were hints scattered throughout the show. Little details that did not quite add up, things that became obvious in hindsight. But when it actually happened, in the Season 5 episode called A Single Pale Rose, it still hit like a freight train. Here is how it unfolds. Stephen notices that Pearl is acting strangely. She seems agitated, like she wants to tell him something but cannot. Stephen discovers that Pearl's gemstone contains a kind of internal space, almost like a filing system of memories, and he enters it. Inside Pearl's gem, Stephen moves through layers of Pearl's psyche, each one representing a different era of her life. He moves deeper and deeper until he reaches the oldest, most buried memory. And there it is. The memory of the day Pink Diamond was shattered. Stephen watches as Pearl shapeshifts into the form of Rose Quartz. He watches as Pink Diamond swallows the fake shards. He watches as Pearl, wearing Rose's face, raises the sword. He watches as Pink Diamond poofs, and the shards scatter, and the watching gems gasp in horror. And he understands. His mother was not Rose Quartz, a brave rebel soldier who stood up to a tyrant. His mother was the tyrant. His mother was Pink Diamond. The entire rebellion, the entire war, was orchestrated by one of the people it was supposedly fighting against. The emotional shockwave of this reveal ripples through every character. Garnet, who built her entire identity around being accepted by Rose, who was told by Rose that she was wonderful and special, has to grapple with the fact that Rose was secretly the diamond, whose society considered Garnet an abomination. Pearl, who carried the secret for over 5,000 years, is finally freed from the burden of silence, but now has to face the reality that everyone else knows what she has been forced to hide. Amethyst, who was born from a kindergarten that Pink Diamond created, has to sit with the knowledge that her creator and her surrogate mother were the same person. Greg, who fell in love with Rose and never questioned her past, learns that the woman he loved was hiding an identity as an authoritarian ruler. And Stephen has to carry all of it. He already knew that his mother had done questionable things. He already knew about bismuth, about the lies, about the secrets. But this is something else entirely. This means the war was not what anyone thought it was. The crystal gems did not defeat a diamond. A diamond defeated herself. The corruption, the cluster, the thousands of years of suffering, all of it happened because Pink Diamond faked her own death and everyone believed it. What I find remarkable about how the show handles this is that it does not turn Rose or Pink Diamond into a straightforward villain. It would have been easy and maybe satisfying in a simple way to reveal that Pink was evil all along. But that is not what Steven Universe does. Instead, it presents Pink as someone who was immature, well-intentioned, deeply flawed, and ultimately selfish in ways she could not see. She wanted to save the Earth, and she did save it, but she did it through deception. She wanted to give the crystal gems freedom, but she lied to them about who she was for their entire relationship. She wanted to be loved for who she really was, but she never let anyone see who she really was. She abandoned Spinel without a second thought. She bubbled bismuth and covered it up. She let Pearl carry an impossible secret. She let the entire gem race believe that a diamond had been murdered, which directly led to the corrupting light and the devastation of thousands of gems. Every tragedy in the show traces back to Pink Diamond's choices. Not because she was malicious, but because she was careless with other people's lives and feelings. She made decisions that felt right in the moment, without considering the long-term consequences. And then she moved on, leaving everyone else to deal with the fallout. One critic, Charles Pulliam Moore, writing for Gizmodo, described Pink Diamond as the villain of the decade, and I think that is a fair assessment, but not in the traditional sense. She is the villain in the way that a parent who means well but keeps making damaging choices is the villain of their child's story. Not out of malice, but out of an inability to fully grasp the impact of her actions on others. Stephen, to his immense credit, does not collapse under the weight of this knowledge. He is shaken profoundly, but he keeps moving forward. He has to, because the diamonds are still out there, and they still believe that Rose Quartz murdered Pink Diamond, and they are coming for Earth. This brings us to the climax of the original series. The events leading up to, and including the episode Change Your Mind, which is a 44-minute special that serves as the Season 5 finale, and the conclusion of the main Steven Universe storyline. The path to change your mind involves Steven traveling to Homeworld. He goes to confront the diamonds to try to make them understand that the war is over, that Earth is worth preserving, that the rigid gem hierarchy is causing more harm than good. He brings the crystal gems with him. They arrive on Homeworld in Pink Diamond's old ship, a massive pink vessel shaped like a pair of legs, which is both awe-inspiring and a little bit absurd, which is very Steven Universe. On Homeworld, Steven is treated as Pink Diamond returned. The gems there believe that Steven's gem means he is Pink Diamond, and they expect him to behave accordingly. He is given Pink's old rooms, Pink's old court, Pink's old responsibilities, and Steven tries, for a while, to play along. He attends a ball. He wears diamond clothing. He smiles and nods and tries to navigate a society that operates on rules he finds suffocating. But it does not work. Steven is not Pink Diamond, and he cannot pretend to be. During the ball, he and Connie fuse into Stevani in front of the entire Diamond Court, which is seen as a scandal of the highest order. Yellow and Blue Diamond are furious. The crystal gems are locked up. everything falls apart. What follows is a series of confrontations and escapes that build toward the final showdown with White Diamond. Yellow and Blue Diamond, pushed to their breaking points by Steven's persistence and his refusal to conform, begin to crack. Steven appeals to their emotions, to the grief they have been carrying for thousands of years, to the love they still feel for Pink Diamond. Blue Diamond, who has been drowning in sadness since Pink's supposed death, is the first to waver. She sees Steven, really sees him, and she begins to understand that he is not Pink. He is someone new. Someone who cares about the things Pink cared about, but who approaches them with honesty instead of deception. Yellow, harder and more resistant, takes longer to reach. But she too eventually breaks down. There is a moment where Yellow Diamond, this towering figure of military authority, begins to cry, and the emotional weight of it is enormous. She has been holding everything together for thousands of years, running the empire, managing the colonies, trying to bury the pain of losing Pink under an avalanche of work. And it all comes crashing down. But White Diamond is another matter entirely. White is the real final boss of the original series. She has been sitting in her ship at the top of Homeworld for millennia, radiating her light, controlling everything from a distance. She does not believe she can be wrong. She does not believe she has flaws. In her mind, imperfection is a disease, and her job is to purify everyone around her. When Steven finally confronts her, she does not take him seriously. She sees him as Pink Diamond throwing another tantrum. She uses her power to take control of the crystal gems, removing their personalities and turning them into extensions of herself, their eyes going white, their voices becoming hers. And then she does something that is supposed to end the argument forever. She reaches down and pulls Steven's gem out of his body. This is one of the most intense moments in the entire franchise. Steven collapses. Without his gem, he is just a human, fragile, and dying. White Diamond holds the pink gem up, expecting Pink Diamond to reform, expecting to see her youngest diamond return, chastened and ready to behave. But that is not what happens. Instead, the gem reforms into Pink Steven, a glowing, entirely gem version of Steven himself. Not Rose, not Pink Diamond, Steven. The gem has chosen its own identity. It is Steven. Pink Steven turns to White Diamond and, with a voice that is simultaneously gentle and terrifyingly powerful, says, "She's gone." White Diamond cannot process this. She insists that Pink must still be in there. But Pink Steven repeats it. She's gone. When the two halves of Steven, the human half and the gem half, reunite, they run toward each other and embrace, forming a complete Steven who is, for the first time, fully and undeniably himself. Not Rose's legacy, not Pink's heir, just Steven. This moment breaks White Diamond. She blushes pink. She, the self-proclaimed embodiment of perfection, shows color. She shows emotion. She shows imperfection. And in that moment, her entire worldview, the one she built an empire around, crumbles. What follows is a rapid and somewhat controversial denouement. The Diamonds agree to dismantle their empire. They agree to stop the colonization. They agree to help heal the corrupted gems on Earth. Steven, Yellow, Blue, and eventually White combine their powers at Rose's healing fountain, and the corrupted gems are restored. Thousands of gems who had been trapped in monstrous forms for over 5,000 years are given their minds and bodies back. It is a moment of incredible catharsis. Characters we had seen only as monsters throughout the entire series suddenly have faces and names and voices. They are confused, disoriented, grateful. The crystal gems are reunited with comrades they thought they had lost forever. Jasper, who had become corrupted herself during the events of the show, is healed. Centipedal, the first corrupted gem Steven ever tried to help, is revealed to be a Nephrite who was simply trying to get back to her crew. Era 3 begins. A new age for gem civilization where the hierarchy is dismantled, where gems are free to choose their own paths, where cross-gem fusion is no longer a crime, where defective gems are no longer punished for existing. It is, on paper, a happy ending. The tyrants have been reformed, the Empire has fallen, the good guys won. But Steven Universe is not quite done telling its story. Because the question it has not yet answered is this: what happens to the hero after the war is over? I think one of the most beautiful things about Change Your Mind is that it does not end with a battle. It ends with Steven insisting on his own identity. The climax is not a fight. It is a boy saying, "I am not my mother, I am me." And the most powerful being in the universe having to accept that. After everything, after the war and the deception and the corruption and the suffering, the thing that finally changes the Diamond's minds is not a weapon. It is a teenager who refuses to be anyone other than himself. That is Steven Universe at its best. And there is still more of the story to tell. 2 years pass between the events of Change Your Mind and the Steven Universe movie. During that time, Steven has been busy. He has been helping dismantle Homeworld's empire, traveling across the galaxy, working with the Diamonds to undo the damage of millennia of authoritarian rule. On Earth, a community called Little Homeworld has been constructed. A place where gems who are adjusting to their new freedom can live alongside humans and learn how to exist outside the rigid structures they were made for. Beach City has expanded. The crystal gems have settled into something that resembles peace. And Steven, now 16 years old, has grown into a confident, capable young man who seems to have things figured out. Then Spinel arrives and everything falls apart. Spinel's story is one of the most heartbreaking in the entire franchise, and I mentioned her earlier, but now is when it all comes together. Remember, Pink Diamond had a playmate, a gem created for the sole purpose of being Pink's best friend. They played together in Pink's garden, a private space somewhere in the cosmos. They were close. Spinel adored Pink, would have done anything for her. When Pink was given Earth and decided to pursue her colony, she did not want Spinel to come along. Spinel was part of her old life, the childish one she was trying to leave behind. So Pink told Spinel to play a game. "Stand right here," she said, "and don't move until I come back." And Spinel, loving and trusting, stood there. She stood in that garden for 6,000 years, alone, motionless, waiting, smiling through the millennia because she truly believed, that Pink would come back for her. She did not come back. Pink became Rose. Rose led a rebellion. Rose fell in love. Rose had a child. Rose gave up her physical form. And not once in 6,000 years did she ever go back for Spinel. Spinel finally learned the truth when Steven sent a message out to the universe declaring peace. The broadcast reached the garden. Spinel heard it. And in that moment, her entire world shattered. Pink was gone, had been gone for years, had never intended to come back. The game was not a game. It was abandonment. Spinel comes to Earth consumed by rage and grief. She brings 2 weapons with her: a rejuvenator, a scythe-like device that can reset any gem to their factory default state, essentially wiping their memories and returning them to the personality they had when they first emerged, and a biopoison injector, a massive machine that she plunges into the Earth, pumping toxic substance into the ground that will destroy all organic life on the planet. She attacks Steven and the crystal gems. She hits Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl with the rejuvenator, resetting them. Garnet loses her memories and diffuses into a confused Ruby and Sapphire, who do not recognize each other. Pearl reverts to a blank, obedient servant who calls Steven "my diamond." Amethyst loses her personality entirely, becoming a shapeless, childlike gem who does not know what she is. Steven himself is struck, but instead of losing his memories, he loses access to his gem powers. The movie becomes a race against time. Steven has to help each of the crystal gems remember who they are, while the injector poisons the Earth. It is structured brilliantly. Each gem has a trigger, a key experience that defined who they became. For Pearl, it is the choice to be more than a servant, to fight for someone she loves. For Amethyst, it is the acceptance that she does not need to be what she was made to be. For Ruby and Sapphire, it is finding each other and choosing to fuse, choosing to be Garnet. For Steven, it is realizing that he does not have to be his mother, he has to be himself. But what makes the movie really land is how it handles Spinel. because Spinel is not a villain. She is a victim. She was abandoned by someone she loved, and her response to that trauma is destruction. The movie does not excuse her actions, but it also does not demonize her. It shows how pain, left unaddressed for long enough, can twist someone into something they were never meant to be. Spinel was made to be joyful. She was made to play and laugh and be a friend, and Pink Diamond took all of that away by treating her as disposable. Steven, being Steven, tries to help Spinel. He shows her compassion. He tells her that what happened to her was wrong. And eventually, Spinel lets go of her rage, not because she has forgotten the pain, but because she realizes that destroying Earth will not undo it. At the end of the movie, Spinel goes to live with the Diamonds on Homeworld. The Diamonds accept her because she reminds them of Pink. It is bittersweet. Spinel is not healed, not really. She is still carrying the weight of 6,000 years of abandonment. But she is moving forward. She has found people who want her around. The movie is a musical, by the way, heavily musical. Rebecca Sugar wrote the songs, and they are extraordinary. Spinel's villain song, Other Friends, is an absolute banger that became one of the most popular songs from the franchise. And the movie's central theme, the idea that people can grow and change and that your past does not define your future, is delivered with real emotional honesty. But here is the thing about the movie that matters most for the bigger story. It is another example of Pink Diamond's legacy of carelessness causing pain. Pink did not mean to hurt Spinel. She probably did not even think about Spinel after she left, and that is almost worse. It is not cruelty, it is indifference. It is someone moving through the world without considering the impact they leave behind. And Steven, once again, is the one left to clean up the mess. Which brings us to Steven Universe Future, the final chapter, and arguably the bravest thing the show ever did. Steven Universe Future is a 20-episode limited series that aired from December 2019 to March 2020. It serves as an epilogue to the entire franchise, and its premise is deceptively simple. What happens to the hero after the happy ending? Steven has saved the universe. The Diamonds have reformed. The corrupted gems are healed. Little Homeworld is thriving. Steven runs Little Homeschool, an educational program where gems learn to find their new purpose in a world without hierarchy. He helps them discover what they enjoy, assigns them roles, counsels them through their adjustment. He is everyone's go-to problem solver, the fixer, the helper. And for a while, it works. Steven seems happy. He is doing good work. He's surrounded by people who love him. But then his friends start moving on. Connie is preparing for college. She is studying, taking exams, thinking about her future. Sadie has her band and is touring. Lars came back from space and opened a bakery. Even the gems are finding their own paths. Bismuth runs a forge. Peridot and Lapis are teaching at Little Homeschool. Everyone has figured out what they want to do with their lives. Everyone except Steven. And here is where the show gets really honest about something that most children's shows, period, never address. Steven has spent his entire life solving other people's problems. He has been kidnapped, imprisoned, attacked, manipulated, forced into a war he did not start, confronted with his mother's dark past, nearly killed multiple times, watched friends die, been responsible for saving the entire planet. He was a child soldier, essentially, thrown into an intergalactic conflict at the age of 12. And nobody, at any point during all of that, stopped to ask if he was okay. In the episode Growing Pains, Steven visits a doctor after his body starts acting strangely. He is randomly glowing pink. His body is changing shape involuntarily. He's having episodes of extreme physical distress. The doctor, after examining him and hearing about his life, explains what is happening. Steven's body has been in a near constant state of fight or flight since childhood. His system is so attuned to danger that even minor, everyday stressors now trigger extreme physical responses. In clinical terms, what Steven is experiencing is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is explicitly stated in the show. A children's animated series on Cartoon Network directly names PTSD and shows its effects on a teenage protagonist. Rebecca Sugar drew from her own experiences with anxiety and panic attacks to write this arc, and she wanted to show that the aftermath of trauma does not disappear just because the external threat is gone. As future progresses, Steven gets worse. His powers become unstable and dangerous. He accidentally shatters Jasper during a sparring match, which fills him with horror. He revives her, but the knowledge that he is capable of that level of destruction terrifies him. He lashes out at the people he loves. He pushes Connie away. He picks fights with people who used to be enemies, not because he wants to help them, but because he needs someone to fight. He is losing control, and he is too proud, too scared, too deeply conditioned to be the helper to admit it. He confronts White Diamond on Homeworld and nearly shatters her too, his powers flaring out of control in a moment of rage. He is horrified by himself. He does not understand what is happening to him. And then, in the penultimate episodes, it all comes to a head. Steven has a complete breakdown. He tells everyone the things he has done, the people he has hurt, the ways he has been falling apart. And as he does, his body begins to change. His self-hatred, his unprocessed trauma, his belief that he is fundamentally broken and dangerous, all of it manifests physically. Steven transforms into a monster. A massive pink kaiju-like creature that rampages through Beach City. The final boss of Steven Universe is Steven himself, not a diamond. Not a homeworld general. Not an ancient weapon. The thing that Steven has to face in the end is his own pain. And how is it resolved? Not through combat. Not through a clever strategy or a powerful new ability. It is resolved through love. The crystal gems, the diamonds, Greg, Connie, the people of Beach City, everyone who has ever been part of Steven's life comes together. They surround the monster. They do not fight it. They hold it. They tell Steven that they love him, that he is not a monster, that he does not have to carry everything alone, even the cluster, the geo-weapon buried in the Earth's core that Steven saved years ago, reaches up through the ground to hold him. Slowly, Steven shrinks. The monster recedes. He returns to his human form, crying, exhausted, but present. He is back. In the final episode titled The Future, Steven makes a decision. He is going to leave Beach City. Not because he does not love it. Not because he does not love the people there. But because he needs space. He needs to figure out who he is when he is not saving the world. He needs therapy. And he says so explicitly. He needs to drive somewhere new and breathe. He says goodbye to everyone. He gives gifts. He hugs his dad. He kisses Connie. He tells the crystal gems that he loves them. And then he gets in his car and he drives away, and the camera pulls up and away from Beach City, and the screen goes to the stars. It is one of the most emotionally honest endings in animation history. It does not wrap everything up in a bow. It does not show a Steven healed and happy in a flash forward. It shows him taking the first step, leaving, choosing to address his trauma instead of pushing through it, choosing himself for the first time in his entire life. Rebecca Sugar said in an interview with Fast Company that she wanted the ending to show that self-destructive tendencies can affect anyone, and that seeking help is not weakness, it is necessary. She drew from her own therapeutic journey to write Stevens, and it shows in every frame. The episode Fragments from Steven Universe Future was nominated for the 2020 Primetime Emmy Award for Short Form Animated Program. The entire franchise won a GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Kids and Family Program, becoming the first animated series to receive that honor. It won a Peabody Award for Children's and Youth Programming, and it was ranked number 99 on the BBC's list of the 100 greatest television series of the 21st century. This is a show that started as a cartoon about a boy and his magical alien guardians, and ended as one of the most emotionally sophisticated and socially important animated series ever made. Actually, before I start wrapping up, there are a few more corners of this universe I really want to explore tonight. We have covered the big arcs and the major characters, but one of the things that makes Steven Universe so rewarding is the depth of its world. The show is full of locations, creatures, objects, and smaller character moments that deserve their own time. So let us wander through some of them. Let me talk about the gem locations scattered across Earth. One of the things the show does beautifully is hint at the sheer scale of what happened during the colonization. Thousands of years before Steven was born, the gems built structures all over the planet. Communication hubs, observation towers, warp pads, arenas. Most of these are in ruins by the time we see them, overgrown and decaying. But they are everywhere. Every time the crystal gems go on a mission, they are usually visiting one of these ancient sites to deal with a corrupted gem or retrieve a dangerous artifact. The Galaxy Warp is one of the most significant. It is a massive circular platform containing dozens of warp pads that once connected Earth to Homeworld and other colonies. By the time of the show, every pad except the one leading to Earth's local warp network has been broken. Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl destroyed them deliberately to prevent Homeworld from returning. When Peridot shows up in the episode Warp Tour, arriving through a repaired warp pad, it is the first sign that Homeworld has not forgotten about Earth. The Lunar Sea Spire is one of the first locations we visit in the series. It is a crumbling, gorgeous tower rising from the ocean, once a place of gem, culture, and community, now falling apart. Steven's first real mission involves trying to save it by returning a magical artifact to the top of the spire. He fails. The spire collapses into the sea. And that failure is actually important narratively, because it establishes early on that Steven does not always succeed. This is not a show where the hero wins every time. The Sky Arena is an ancient floating battlefield where gems once dueled. Pearl takes Steven and Connie there to train, and it is where Connie first learns to sword fight. The architecture is alien and beautiful, suspended in the clouds, and it speaks to a gem culture that valued combat as both necessity and sport. The kindergartens, of course, are among the most important locations. The prime kindergarten, where Amethyst was created, is this deeply unsettling canyon. The walls are covered in person-shaped holes. Nothing grows. The silence is oppressive. When Amethyst takes Steven there in the episode On the Run, she is confronting the reality of her own creations. Shores, and the kindergarten serves as a physical manifestation of her insecurity. She comes from a place that is dead, a place that kills everything around it, and she has spent her entire life wondering if that makes her wrong. The beta kindergarten is even more unsettling in a different way. The holes are jagged, uneven, crowded together. Some emerge from the ground at wrong angles. Some are so close together they overlap. It looks rushed, desperate, almost violent. Peridot, who knows how kindergartens are supposed to look, is appalled by the beta's construction. It was a product of war, of Homeworld needing bodies for the fight, and the carelessness of its creation is visible in every surface. Rose's Fountain is another beautiful location. It is a magical spring with healing properties, originally created by Rose Quartz. The fountain's waters can heal cracked gems and repair minor damage. The crystal gems use it throughout the series, though it has fallen into disrepair over the centuries, overgrown with brambles that sometimes need to be cleared away. It is where the diamonds and Steven ultimately gather to heal the corrupted gems at the end of Change Your Mind, combining their powers in the same waters Rose once used alone. The human zoo deserves a deeper look too. Blue Diamond created it as a misguided attempt to address Pink's concerns about organic life. It is a space station orbiting Earth, staffed by amethyst guards, the Famethyst, as they are affectionately called, a group of quartz soldiers who were created on Earth and later stationed at the zoo after the war. Inside the zoo, a small group of humans live in a completely controlled environment. They are happy, in a way. They have no concept of the outside world. Their daily routine is dictated by a voice called the Choosening, which pairs them up for companionship. They have never experienced sadness, conflict, or choice. When Steven visits the zoo and accidentally introduces the concept of saying no to one of the humans, It causes a cascade of emotional reactions that the humans have no framework to process. They have never been told no. They have never had to deal with disappointment. It is a deeply uncomfortable commentary on what protection looks like when it removes all agency. Now, I want to spend a little more time with Connie Maheswaran, because she is absolutely essential to Stephen's story and to the show as a whole. Connie is introduced early in the series as a bookish, lonely girl who struggles to fit in. Her parents, particularly her mother, Dr. Priyanka Maheswaran, are protective to the point of being suffocating. Connie is not allowed to eat certain foods, is not allowed to watch certain shows, and is expected to focus entirely on academics. She is Indian American, and the show handles her cultural background with respect without making it her defining trait. When Connie meets Stephen, her world opens up, literally. Through Stevani's existence is proof that the boundaries between humans and gems are not as fixed as everyone assumed. One of Connie's most significant moments comes in the Sworn to the Sword arc, where Pearl trains her so intensely that Connie begins to internalize Pearl's own unhealthy pattern, the belief that her purpose is to sacrifice herself for Stephen the way Pearl sacrificed herself for Rose. Stephen has to stop the training and tell Connie that he does not want her to throw her life away for him. He wants them to fight together as equals. It is a crucial moment for both of them and for Pearl, who has to confront the fact that she was projecting her own trauma onto a child. In Steven Universe Future, Connie is preparing for her own future. She is studying for college entrance exams. She has a life plan. And Stephen, who does not have a plan and cannot seem to figure out what he wants, feels left behind. Their relationship is tested, but it endures. In the finale, they share a kiss before Stephen leaves Beach City, and it is understood that they will find their way back to each other, even if the road ahead is uncertain. I also want to talk about the corrupted gems in a bit more detail, because they represent something really important in the show. Every monster that Stephen and the crystal gems fight in the early seasons is not a random alien creature. It is a person. A gem who was once sentient, who had thoughts and feelings and a name, and who was twisted by the diamond's corrupting light into something unrecognizable. The crystal gems do not kill these monsters. They poof them, capture their gemstones, and bubble them in the temple, essentially putting them in stasis, hoping that someday they might find a cure. Stephen tries to heal corruption multiple times throughout the series. His most sustained effort involves a corrupted gem he calls Centipedal, a small insectoid creature that he befriends. Through patience and his healing abilities, Stephen manages to partially restore her, enough for her to draw pictures and communicate in a limited way. She draws the diamonds as symbol. She draws the corrupting light. She draws her crew, the other gems she was serving with when the blast hit. Stephen can see the person inside the monster, and it breaks his heart that he cannot fully bring her back. When the corrupted gems are finally healed at the end of Change Your Mind, Centipedal is revealed to be a nephrite, a gem type that serves as a pilot and crew leader. She is reunited with her crew. She has a name. She has a life. And for the first time in over 5,000 years, she is herself again. That moment, multiplied across thousands of healed gems, is one of the most emotionally overwhelming scenes in the entire series. The corrupted gems are a metaphor for trauma. They are beings who have been so deeply damaged by an act of violence that they cannot function as themselves anymore. They lash out, not from malice, but from pain and confusion. And the crystal gems approach to them, capturing them gently, preserving their gemstones, never giving up hope that they can be healed, mirrors the show's broader philosophy about how we should approach people who are hurting. There is one more character I want to mention because I think his arc does not get enough attention, and that is Onion. Now, Onion is a bizarre little kid who lives in Beach City. He does not speak. He appears to have no empathy or social awareness. He steals things, sets things on fire, and generally behaves like a tiny anarchist. Most of the time, he is played for comedy. But there are moments scattered throughout the series that suggest something deeper is going on with him. His father, Yellowtail, is a fisherman who is away from home frequently. and Onion clearly misses him. In the episode Onion Friend, we get a glimpse into Onion's home life and see that behind the chaos, there is a lonely kid who expresses himself in unusual ways because he does not have the tools to do it conventionally. It is a small thing, but it is very Steven Universe. Even the weirdest, most seemingly one-note character is given depth if you pay attention. And speaking of paying attention, one of the great joys of rewatching Steven Universe is catching all the foreshadowing. The show is meticulously constructed. Details planted in Season 1 do not pay off until Season 5. The murals in the Gem Temple, first seen in the episode Serious Steven, contain imagery that foreshadows the pink diamond reveal years before it happens. Pearl's behavior around Rose's secrets, her inability to speak directly about certain topics, her hands covering her mouth at odd moments, all of these are visible from the very beginning if you know what to look for. The show trusts its audience to be attentive, and it rewards that attention generously. The way the show handles its antagonists in general is worth discussing too. Steven Universe does not really have traditional villains in the way most action-adventure shows do. Almost every antagonist is eventually revealed to be a person with understandable motivations who has been hurt or misled. Jasper is not evil. She is a soldier who lost everything she believed in. Lapis is not a villain. She is a trauma survivor. Peridot is not malicious. She is following orders because that is all she knows. Even the diamonds, who are responsible for untold suffering, are eventually humanized and shown to be capable of change. The show argues consistently that people are not defined by their worst actions. They can grow, they can learn, they can be better. Whether you agree with how the show resolves its conflicts, and some fans have debated this passionately, especially regarding the Diamond's redemption, I think the intent is clear and sincere. Rebecca Sugar wanted to make a show where the answer to hatred is not more hatred, where the response to cruelty is not cruelty, where even the worst person in the universe can look at themselves honestly and choose to be different. It is idealistic, yes, but I think the world needs a little idealism, especially in stories meant for young people who are just beginning to figure out what they believe. One last thing before I bring this all to a close. Steven Universe is a show about growing up, not in the abstract metaphorical way that most coming-of-age stories handle it. Steven literally grows up on screen. He starts the series as a chubby, cheerful kid in a red shirt. He ends it as a teenager who has been through things that no one his age should have to deal with. His body changes, his voice changes, his understanding of the world changes. And the show takes its time with all of that. It does not rush, it does not skip over the awkward parts. It sits with them. And I think that is why so many people, adults and kids alike, connected with this show so deeply. Because it does not pretend that growing up is easy. It does not pretend that knowing who you are is simple. It does not pretend that love fixes everything, or that being a good person protects you from pain. It just tells you the truth gently, with music and color and warmth, and then it reminds you that you are not alone. There is something else I keep coming back to, and I think it is worth spending a moment on before we start to wind down. The show's relationship with the concept of home. Steven Universe is, in a very real sense, a show about finding where you belong. For the Gems, home world was never truly home. It was a place of rigid rules and enforced perfection. Earth became home for the Crystal Gems not because it was their planet of origin, but because it was the place where they could be themselves. Garnet could exist as a fusion. Pearl could be more than a servant. Amethyst could be accepted despite being different from what she was supposed to be. And Rose, or Pink Diamond, could live freely, unbound by the expectations of her fellow diamonds. Beach City itself is a character in this way. It is the kind of place that accepts people. The humans of Beach City do not fully understand the gems or their cosmic drama, but they accept them as neighbors. They invite them to parties. They complain about the property damage from gem battles and then move on with their lives. There is an episode where the town holds a meeting to discuss whether the gems are a safety hazard, and it is played partly for comedy, but it also captures something genuine about small town life. People adapt. They make room for the unusual. They figure it out. For Steven specifically, the question of home is central to his journey. His home is the beach house, built into the temple. It is where he sleeps on his loft bed, where he keeps his ukulele and his collection of Cookie Cat ice cream wrappers, where he watches Crying Breakfast Friends, that absurd cartoon within a cartoon that he adores. That house is his safe space. It is where his family is, where his memories are, where everything that matters to him lives. And that is what makes the ending of Future so powerful. Stephen leaves home. He gets in his car, and he drives away from the house, the temple, beach city, and everything that defined his childhood. Not because he does not love it, but because staying would mean staying trapped in a version of himself that he has outgrown. He needs to find a new home, or maybe he needs to learn that home is not a place at all. It is a feeling. It is the knowledge that the people you love will be there when you come back. The gems, in their own way, also grapple with what home means across the series. When Lapis first arrives on Earth, she sees it as a prison, the planet where she was trapped for millennia. She desperately wants to go back to Homeworld, because that is where she thinks she belongs. But when she finally returns, Homeworld is nothing like she remembers. It has changed. She has changed. And she realizes that the place she was longing for does not exist anymore. Eventually, reluctantly, she accepts that Earth is her home now. Not because it is perfect, but because the people she cares about are there. Peridot goes through something similar. She arrives on Earth as a Homeworld loyalist, expecting to complete her mission and leave. By the end of her arc, she is passionately defending the Earth as a place worth protecting, decorating a barn with alien tchotchkes and calling it home. The barn gets destroyed later in the series, which devastates both Peridot and the audience, because it was more than a building. It was a symbol of the life she had chosen. Even the diamonds ultimately have to reckon with what home means. Homeworld, as they built it, was a monument to control and perfection. It was not a home, it was a machine. When Era 3 begins and the hierarchy is dismantled, Homeworld has to become something new. And the diamonds, for the first time in their ancient existence, have to figure out what they want their home to look like when it is not built on fear. I think that is why the show resonates with so many people who feel like they do not quite fit in. Steven Universe says over and over that you are allowed to choose your home. You are allowed to choose your family. You are allowed to walk away from the place you came from if it is hurting you. And you are allowed to build something new somewhere else. That is not weakness. That is courage. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. There is a quiet scene in the finale where Steven is packing up his car, and he takes one last look at the beach house. The camera lingers on the familiar spaces, the kitchen where he used to make waffles, the warp pad where the gems would materialize after missions, the spot on the floor where Lion usually naps. And for a moment, you can feel the weight of everything that happened in that house. Every adventure, every crisis, every bedtime song Greg sang, every late night conversation with Garnet, every argument with Amethyst, every moment of Pearl teaching him something new. And then Steven turns around and he drives. The road stretches out ahead of him, open and unknown. And you realize that this is not an ending, it is a beginning. Steven's story does not stop when the show stops. It keeps going somewhere out there, in a car on a highway, with a boy who is finally, for the first time, choosing his own path. That is the kind of ending this show deserved. Quiet, honest, full of love and full of uncertainty. Just like life. And honestly, I feel like I would be doing this whole evening a disservice if I did not spend a little more time with some of the details that make this universe so special. We have covered the big arc, the history from Ice Ancient Gem civilization through to Steven driving away from Beach City. But there is so much richness in the spaces between those major beats that I want to sit with for a while. So let's settle in a bit deeper. One of the things I did not talk about enough is the music. Steven Universe is, in many ways, a musical. Not in the sense that every episode has a big song number, though plenty of them do, but in the sense that music is woven into the DNA of the show. Rebecca Sugar wrote the vast majority of the songs herself, and they serve as emotional cornerstones for the most important moments in the series. When a character sings in Steven Universe, it is not filler. It is the moment where the emotional truth of a scene is laid bare. Take Stronger Than You, Garnet's battle anthem from the Season 1 finale. Voiced by Estelle. It is a song about being a fusion, about being made of love, and about the fact that Jasper, who is trying to destroy her, simply cannot beat something built on that foundation. It became one of the most iconic songs in modern animation and resonated far beyond the show's fan base. Or It's Over, Isn't It?, where Pearl sings about watching the person she loved fall in love with someone else, and how she has to accept that Rose chose Greg. The melody is elegant and aching, and Dee Dee Magno-Hall's vocal performance is genuinely stunning. There is Here Comes a Thought, a duet between Garnet and Stevonnie about managing intrusive thoughts and anxiety, which uses a meditation metaphor that has been praised by mental health professionals as an accessible tool for younger viewers dealing with similar issues. The movie leans even harder into the musical format, with every major character getting their own song. Spinell's Other Friends is a showstopper, a tap dance villain number that is simultaneously catchy and menacing. Drift Away, the song that plays during the montage of Spinell waiting alone in the garden for 6,000 years, might be the saddest song in the entire franchise. The lyrics are so simple. She is singing about waiting, about believing that any moment now her best friend will come back. And the repetition, the way the song stretches on and on, mirrors the endless, crushing sameness of her wait. Sugar has talked about how music was essential to the way she processes emotions, and that shows in every note. The songs in Steven Universe do not just advance the plot, they crack open the characters' inner lives in ways that dialogue alone could not. I also want to talk a little more about some of the supporting characters and side stories that give the show its texture. Peridot's redemption arc is one of the most satisfying character journeys in the series. When we first meet her, she is this small, uptight, homeworld technician who refers to Earth as a failed colony and views organic life with total contempt. She is task-oriented to the point of lacking any personality beyond her function. She is an Era 2 gem, meaning she was created during the resource shortage that followed the war, and she lacks many of the natural abilities that older gems possess. She compensates with technology, specifically her limb enhancers, robotic extensions that give her fingers that can project screens, shoot lasers, and manipulate objects. When she is stranded on Earth and eventually captured by the crystal gems, everything changes. Slowly, grudgingly, and with a lot of resistance, Peridot begins to see Earth differently. She discovers that she has a power of her own ferrokinesis, the ability to manipulate metal, which she did not know she had because Era 2 gems were told they did not have powers. She falls in love with a television show called Camp Pining Hearts and becomes obsessively invested in the shipping dynamics of the characters. She starts calling Yellow Diamond a clod on a galactic communication device, which is essentially telling your boss to go to hell while the entire solar system listens. She becomes fiercely protective of the Earth and the crystal gems, and her friendship with Lapis Lazuli, the two of them living in a barn outside Beach City, decorating it, watching TV together, growing pumpkins, is one of the most endearing relationships in the show. Lapis Lazuli herself has one of the darkest backstories of any character. Trapped in a mirror for thousands of years, conscious but unable to move or communicate, she experienced a kind of isolation that is almost incomprehensible. When Steven frees her, she is angry. Not just at Homeworld, but at the Crystal Gems, who she sees as responsible for the war that led to her imprisonment. Her relationship with Jasper, the forced fusion of Malekith, is a whole arc of trauma. When she is finally free of that, she settles on Earth but remains deeply wary and withdrawn. She learns to trust again through Peridot and Steven, but it is a long, fragile process. There is a moment in the series where Lapis decides to leave Earth because she is afraid that Homeworld will come back and she will be imprisoned again. She takes the entire barn into space with her water powers and just leaves. It is heartbreaking because you understand why she is running. She has been hurt so badly that the possibility of being hurt again is more than she can bear. Then there is Jasper. In many ways, Jasper is the show's most tragic antagonist. She was created in the beta kindergarten, that rushed, sloppy facility in the desert, but she emerged perfect. The ultimate quartz. She was everything Homeworld wanted a soldier to be. Powerful, disciplined, loyal. She fought in the war under Pink Diamond, and she was there when Pink was supposedly shattered. Her entire identity, her entire sense of self, is built around being a perfect warrior who serves her diamond. When Jasper comes to Earth and encounters Steven, she sees Rose Quartz's gem, and she is consumed by a need for revenge and validation. She wants to defeat Rose, to prove that her diamond's death meant something, that the war meant something. But over the course of the show, everything Jasper believes in crumbles. Her diamond was not murdered. Her diamond was Rose Quartz. The entire war was a lie. The thing she has built her life around, her loyalty to Pink Diamond, was given to someone who did not even have the courage to exist under her own name. Jasper ends up corrupted, healed, and then in Steven Universe Future, she becomes something like Steven's sparring partner, someone he goes to when he wants to fight. Their dynamic in Future is fascinating because Jasper is the only person who does not try to help Steven or fix him. She just fights him. And in a twisted way, that is what Steven thinks he needs, someone who will meet his rage with equal force. Of course, it goes horribly wrong when Steven accidentally shatters her, and that moment becomes one of the turning points of his mental health crisis. I want to touch on broader themes of the show too because I think they matter, especially in the context of why this story resonates so deeply with so many people. Steven Universe is, at its core, a show about identity. About figuring out who you are when the world keeps trying to tell you who you should be. Steven has to figure out who he is when everyone sees him as Rose Quartz's son, or Pink Diamond's heir, or the savior of the universe. Garnet has to assert her identity as a fusion in a society that considers her existence a crime. Pearl has to discover who she is beyond her devotion to Rose. Amethyst has to accept herself despite being defective. Peridot has to learn that her worth is not determined by her function. Even the Diamonds have to confront the fact that their identities as perfect, infallible rulers were built on a lie. The show is also deeply, unapologetically about love. Not just romantic love, though there is plenty of that. Love in all its forms. The love between friends. The love between a parent and a child. The love between chosen family. The love that motivates someone to change, to grow, to become better than they were. Steven's greatest power is not his shield or his healing ability. It is his capacity to love people who have given him every reason not to. He loves the Diamonds, who traumatized his planet. He loves Jasper, who tried to destroy him. He loves Spinel, who tried to kill him and poison the earth. He does not love them because they deserve it. He loves them because he believes that love is the thing that can change them. And he is right. But the show is also honest about the limits of that love. Steven Universe Future is essentially an exploration of what happens when you pour so much of yourself into loving and helping others that you have nothing left for yourself. Steven's love is not infinite. His compassion has a cost, and that cost catches up with him. The LGBTQ themes in the show deserve special mention. Rebecca Sugar, who is bisexual and non-binary, created a show where queer relationships are not subtext. They are text. Garnet is a lesbian relationship made manifest. Ruby and Sapphire love each other, and the show never once shies away from showing that love openly. Their wedding episode, which aired in July 2018, was a watershed moment for children's animation. Cartoon Network received backlash in some markets, and certain countries censored the episode. But Sugar and the crew fought for it because they believed it was important. And it was. The show also explores gender identity through Stevonnie, who is non-binary and uses they and them pronouns. Stevonnie is presented as beautiful and natural, and the show does not make their gender a source of conflict or confusion. They simply exist, and the world accepts them. For many young viewers, Stevonnie was the first non-binary character they had ever seen on screen. Now, let me share a few smaller details and fun facts that I came across while researching all of this, because I think they add lovely texture to the world. The beach city that Steven lives in is located in the fictional state of Delmarva, which is a real geographic term for the peninsula shared by Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. Sugar chose this setting partly because of its small-town coastal vibe and partly because of her own East Coast roots. Greg Universe's real last name is DeMeo. He changed it to Universe after a musician he admired, and he kept the name even after his music career never took off. In Steven Universe Future, there is an episode called Mr. Universe, where Steven visits Greg's childhood home and learns about his father's upbringing, which was strict and stifling. Greg left that life behind to pursue freedom and music, and the name Universe was part of that reinvention. It is a small detail, but it mirrors one of the show's biggest themes: the tension between who you were made to be and who you choose to become. Lion, Steven's magical pink companion, is never fully explained. He is clearly connected to Rose Quartz. His mane contains a pocket dimension that holds Rose's secrets. His abilities mirror Lars's after Lars is resurrected. The implication is that Lion was once a normal lion who died, and Rose brought him back with her healing tears, the same way Steven would later resurrect Lars. But this is never explicitly confirmed in the show. Lion remains a little bit of a mystery, which I think is intentional. Not everything in Steven Universe needs a complete explanation. Some things are allowed to just be magical. The Strawberry Battlefield, the site of one of the war's major engagements, is covered in enormous strawberries that have grown from the nutrients left behind by the remains of fallen gems. It is one of the most visually striking locations in the show, beautiful and horrifying at the same time. A field of fruit growing from a graveyard. The Crystal Temple, where the gems live, is shaped like a giant multi-armed woman. The show never fully explains who this figure represents, but the implication is that it is obsidian, the fusion of all 4 original crystal gems: rose, garnet, pearl, and amethyst. Obsidian appears briefly in Change Your Mind and is absolutely massive. A lava-like fusion who climbs the side of the diamond mech to confront blue and yellow diamond. The temple is essentially a monument to the crystal gems' combined power, and this is something I only recently found out. But the show's franchise was revived in 2025 with the announcement of a spin-off series called Lars of the Stars, which is being developed for Prime Video. Lars, the former beach city teenager who was killed and resurrected by Steven, who traveled across the galaxy with the off-colors, is getting his own show. I think that is wonderful. Lars's journey from an insecure, emotionally closed-off kid to a space captain who leads a crew of misfits is one of the great character arcs of the series, and it deserves more room to breathe. So what is the legacy of Steven Universe? Where does it sit in the broader landscape of animation and storytelling? I think it is genuinely one of the most important animated series of the 21st century. Not just because of its LGBTQ representation, though that alone would be enough to earn it a place in history. Not just because of its music, though Sugar's songwriting is extraordinary. And not just because of its emotional storytelling, though few shows for any audience, let alone children, have tackled grief, trauma, identity, and love with this level of sophistication. What makes Steven Universe special is that it trusts its audience. It trusts kids to handle complexity. It trusts them to understand that people are not simply good or evil. It trusts them to sit with ambiguity, to feel uncomfortable, to process difficult emotions without being given easy answers. It never talks down to its viewers. It meets them where they are, and then gently asks them to grow alongside the characters. The show premiered on Cartoon Network on November 4th, 2013, and the original series ran for 160 episodes across 5 seasons, concluding on January 21st, 2019. The movie aired on September 2nd, 2019. Steven Universe Future ran for 20 episodes from December 7th, 2019 to March 27th, 2020. In total, that is roughly 7 years of storytelling. From a silly little show about a boy and his cheeseburger backpack to one of the most emotionally resonant narratives in modern animation. Created by Rebecca Sugar, who was the first woman to independently create a series for Cartoon Network, The show features the voices of Zach Callison as Steven, Estelle as Garnet, Michaela Dietz as Amethyst, Dee Dee Magno Hall as Pearl, and Tom Sharpling as Greg. The supporting cast includes Patty Lupone as Yellow Diamond, Lisa Hannigan as Blue Diamond, Christine Ebersole as White Diamond, and Sarah Stiles as Spinel. The music is performed by the cast and written almost entirely by Sugar herself. The background art was designed by Steven Sugar, Rebecca's real-life brother, and the character who shares his name. And now, I think this is a good place to bring tonight's journey to a close. We started way back at the beginning, with the dawn of Gem Civilization, a race of sentient light beings who built an empire by draining the life from planets. We met the Diamonds, 4 rulers whose love for each other was matched only by their inability to express it in healthy ways. We followed Pink Diamond as she discovered Earth, fell in love with it, and started a rebellion that would define the next 5,000 years of history. We watched as the war ended in devastation, as corruption turned allies into monsters, as a tiny group of survivors built a quiet life on a beach in a small town. We met Steven, a half-human, half-gem boy, who inherited his mother's gemstone and her legacy. We watched him grow up, discover his powers, make friends, face enemies, and learn, piece by piece, the truth about who his mother really was. We saw him travel to Homeworld and change the minds of the most powerful beings in the universe, not through fighting, but through insisting on his own identity. We met Spinel, who waited 6,000 years for someone who was never coming back. And we followed Steven into the aftermath, into the quiet, terrifying place where the hero has to face the one enemy he cannot defeat with kindness, himself. Steven Universe is a story about love and about the damage that love can do when it is careless. It is about identity and the courage it takes to be yourself when everyone else wants you to be someone else. It is about family, chosen and otherwise, and about the fact that the people who love you cannot save you from yourself. You have to do that work on your own. They can only be there when you are ready to let them in. If you have never watched it, I hope this evening has given you a sense of why it matters. And if you have watched it, if you know these characters and this world, I hope it was nice to spend some time here again. Revisiting the lore, remembering the details, letting the story wash over you one more time. There is so much more I could have covered tonight. The individual episodes, the animation, the way the art style shifts during emotional moments, the foreshadowing, hidden in background details, the comic series, the video games, and honestly, I might come back to some of that in a future video. There is always more to talk about when it comes to Steven Universe. The well never quite runs dry. But for tonight, this is where we will leave things. I hope you have had a good time. I hope you're feeling cozy and calm and maybe a little drowsy. That is the goal after all, so close your eyes if you have not already. Let the night settle in, and remember, if every pork chop were perfect, we would not have hot dogs. Sweet dreams, and I will see you in the next one.